Good afternoon. My name is Tim Judah. I'm a correspondent for The Economist, and I cover Balkans, and especially in the last 4 years, I've been covering Ukraine, and of course, I've been covering the Black Sea as part of that conflict. Welcome to our session today. We're going to look at this paper that's been written, Scrutinizing Security in the Black Sea Region, a closer look at Bulgaria, Romania, and the Republic of Moldova. And we're going to sort of open up and talk about the individual countries, or the individual countries that we've written about in this paper, but also about security in the Black Sea as a whole. Now, as a journalist, as I said, I've been covering this region for quite a time. And before I just make a little introduction, I'm going to read you a few lines. And Dimitrios, listen carefully, because this is a question for you. So here is the first quote. The Black Sea is an area of significant geostrategic importance, bridging Europe to Asia, with untapped potential for economic development, strategic transit routes, especially for access to energy, resources, and critical raw materials. And here's a second quote. The Black Sea region is coming into its own, but it is a contested and sometimes dangerous neighborhood. It has undergone countless political transformations over time. And now, once again, it's becoming the subject of an intensive debate. Now, Dimitrios, I'm going to ask you, because before I give my full introduction, I'm just going to ask you just to make a point here. One of those quotes is from the joint communication to the European Parliament and the Council. This is the European Union strategic approach to the Black Sea region. And the other quote is from the report that we did together in 2010 about the Black Sea. It was the Black Sea Commission, which you were one of the authors of, and I was the editor. So can you tell me which quote do you think was from 2010 and which quote from 2025? You're muted. We can't hear you. You've got to unmute.
Yes. All right. You can hear me now, right?
Yes, now we can hear you. So which was which?
I think the second one was from the report in 2010.
You're correct. Great.
Yes.
Well, thank you. But the Black Sea region coming into its own, which was from 2010, well, we could say that in 2025, because it seems to me that this is an ongoing story, and people haven't been paying enough attention to the Black Sea then, and they haven't been paying enough attention to it now. But I just wanted to make that point, that we have been banging on about this region for a very long time. I wanted to tell you a couple of words about what I've been doing, because I'm going to try and share my screen here. Let me see if I can do that. Share screen. And of course, I can't see what I want to show you. I want to show you the deep. Hold on one second while I just get this up again. All right. Let me press share screen again. 1 second. Can you, oops, no. Can you see the map? No, you can't. Can you see a map?
Barely.
What?
Barely.
No. Okay, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to try that once more, and then if it doesn't work, I'm going to abandon that. Okay, just let me try that once more. This is really not working at all, this share screen. I can't get this to work at all. Forget that. Forget it. Okay, why don't I want to do that? Hello? Yeah. What I wanted to show you, was a picture of the Black Sea, because one thing I think that has not been emphasized. There are two. Sorry, let me just kind of recall a bit. There are really two ways that we can talk about the Black Sea. We can do what three of you out of the four of you have done, which is to talk about the individual countries and the impact of the war, especially on your three individual countries, and as Dimitrios has done, talk about it a bit wider. But one of the things that my feeling was that, from having been in the region, in the Black Sea and on the coast, and in the places that are really affected, like Odessa, Kherson, and Mykolaiv, is that one of the things that I didn't feel was reflected in some of in this paper, but I'm going to ask you about this, especially Dimitrios, is the fact that actually the Ukrainians have been incredibly successful in this war and have driven the Russians out of the whole of the western part of the Black Sea. And this has huge ramifications for the future and for navies in general. Because, in fact, what's kind of ironic, perhaps, is that in your advertising for this session, there's a picture of a cruiser, a naval cruiser. In fact, those cruisers today on the Black Sea are completely and utterly useless. Technology has changed the naval warfare so much that really what we're talking about now is, naval drones, and which are either used as to attack things from a long distance, or to carry aerial drones for reconnaissance and as suicide drones. And that has really made traditional navies in the Black Sea kind of vulnerable, all navies in fact kind of vulnerable and in fact quite useless. So I think this is something which we really should talk about. And I think perhaps I did want to show you some pictures, but I'm not being very good at this share screen. It's not really working for me, so I'm just going to ignore that for now. But perhaps we'll just start with you, Dimitrios, because you've talked in a sort of in your paper you've been sort of quite traditional and in kind of looking at the Black Sea. But I think that in terms of security, in terms of kind of what's happened to navies and the ramifications for navies and the ramifications for all sorts of other things, have really changed a lot. But perhaps I would like to start with you and say, look, perhaps you could just tell everyone what's the top line of your papers, and perhaps you can kind of reflect a little bit on what I'm saying. That actually, I think that. And perhaps unless you've been there, but I think you've been there a bit. You've been in Odessa a bit, but I think it's just that I think it's not clear to everyone unless you've been there how much security has changed. I mean, Russia has an important Black Sea fleet. Has or had? Where is this famous Black Sea fleet? It's just gone. It's useless. It's holed up in port. It can't get out of the Black Sea. It can't do very much. I mean, surely this is something that we need to talk about. Okay, Dimitrios, over to you.
Hey, thank you very much, Tim, and thank you also to our host, Südosteuropa-Gesellschaft, for this webinar. Actually, I do mention at some point, I mean, you're right, the emphasis on my paper was a bit different, but at some point I talk about the effects of the war reflect many of the issues that make the Black Sea region a focal point of the redefinition of the international order. And one of the points is the impact of the evolving nature of war and the defense industry's interests in the real-time testing of advances in military hardware, especially drones, on the battlefields of Ukraine. And I think, and this is something that was made very clear to me when I visited Odessa earlier in the spring, this Black Sea Security Forum that's held over there. And it was one of the things in some of the panels, it was very interesting to see a lot of the Ukrainian speaking that are involved in this manufacture of drones and real-time technological advances as they're being tested on the battlefield, how the nature of war is being tested. And this has is evolving, and this has an impact not only on the region and therefore slowing down Russian advances, but also on the way war is going to be fought from now on. And I think also reading one of your articles in The Economist where you talked about these unmanned vehicles, surface vehicles, how they're changing also. I mean, it's not only about how drones affect you from the air, but also the drones, the sea-based drones, and how they affect your fleets and your ships, and how you have to address those things. But one of the things I want to say also is, since I wrote that paper, that was the end of August, early September when it was published, I've been focusing a lot more again on the Black Sea. And my views have also slightly changed. I've been trying to think why I've been doing what you mentioned, which is this traditional sort of focus on the Black Sea region. And the fact is, the Black Sea region per se, I mean, one of the things I was doing in my paper was I was looking at NATO summits and where the references over the last 3 or 4 NATO summits or 5 NATO summits, how many references there were, to words such as Ukraine, Russia, and Black Sea and so on, and Euro-Atlantic area. And of course, we know that at this year's NATO summit, which was a very short communique as opposed to previous communiques, there's hardly any reference. And this is into the first NATO summit of the Trump era, Trump 2 era, as opposed to previous summits. But the fact of the matter is, I think we are focusing wrong on looking at the region as a region, because it's part of wider developments in the international order. And I think for us, maybe minus you, Tim, but all the others here, we come from small or relatively small countries. And we always tend to focus, because we all are countries with frontline states, we tend to focus on our immediate neighborhood. Sometimes we do not want to see or do not have the capacity to deal with a larger picture. And the fact is that the question is, and you see this even, for example, Macron up to 2019 was talking about, and even at the start of the war, the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, he was talking about, building a new architecture, security architecture for Europe, which has to include Russia. And now he's very clear that it cannot include Russia anymore. And I think this, if we see things that way, then we can sort of see what the EU vision for the region is, what the American plans for the region are, and how the states, the literal states or non-literal states of the region, be it Romania, be it Bulgaria, be it Moldova, be it other states around the region and beyond the region, are affected. And what is happening now is, I think the question is, the post-war European security order is one that's being constructed as we speak, as the war is going on, without Russia. Russia is not going to be part of it. It's going to be opposed to it. We're going to be opposing it. And as a result, US policies, which sometimes do not necessarily converge with European ones, for example, happening in Athens later this week is this big energy summit, which stresses a vertical corridor linking to the 3 Cs. Last year it was held in Bucharest. This is the 6th summit where you have, the Minister of Energy, the Minister of the Interior of the US, 2 deputy ministers, 24 energy ministers from all these countries of Central Eastern Europe come together, stressing, which means the relevance, for the Americans, it's about ensuring that they sell liquefied LNG to Europe via Greece, via Romania, via Bulgaria, Romania to Moldova. I think there's even a deal going to be signed where there's going to be this LNG going to Ukraine, so Ukraine can cope with the summer. The Ukrainian energy minister is coming. So and all this means, if you link this also to the EU announcements of a couple of weeks that, there's going to be a decoupling from Russian gas by 2028. So we see that there's an architecture being built which bypasses Russia, and this is what we all have to deal with. And simultaneously, when we look at, you mentioned before, the new EU strategy document of May this year, well, it's all about connectivity. So the region is connecting this region to what's happening in Central Asia. This year, the EU has also had a EU Central Asian Summit. It also has had a connectivity mechanism with countries of Central Asia and the Caucasus. It just came out with a Pact for the Mediterranean. And if you look at all these documents, they're linking all these regions together. And whether it's about energy, the Black Sea submarine cable, for example, energy cable, the digital cable, these are all, plans that the EU has connecting, say, Georgia with Romania, the Black Sea cable, the digital cable, and so on. They all seem to bypass Russia, just like the gas corridor, where Azerbaijan plays a role, is also relevant in that sense. And so we see a convergence of both Washington and the EU, albeit there are differences and different approaches and different priorities, creating a world which has a direct impact on the countries of the Black Sea region, which bypasses Russia. And this is what the investment is on, whether it's on energy, whether it's connectivity, infrastructure, transport, and so on and so forth. And I think in that sense, the region is becoming important again, not as a region per se, where the focus was at the beginning, even with the BSEC at the beginning of the 1990s, was about integrating, inclusive region, where Russia also has a role, to the realization this is almost impossible at this stage. It might happen again in 30 years, I don't know. But at this stage, what is being built as a result of the war that's ongoing, as a result of the impact of the war on a variety of issues, because it's also about, the whole issue about the grain crop exports to the global south and how this has impacted the evolving energy situation, as I mentioned, freedom of navigation issues that come up in the Black Sea, and therefore the need to ensure other sustainable supply routes for troops and equipment and so on. The rare earths issue, the defense industry, I mean, these all have wider implications that are beyond the Black Sea, and where the Black Sea is smack at the center of some of these developments. And I think this is what I would like to, and I was maybe a bit too critical of the EU and its strategy, because we know EU strategies are a product of negotiation, and then the EU is slow at taking off. But the logic is there, because if you start linking it to all the other documents the EU has come out with this year, it doesn't know how to sell them. It doesn't know how to make them really relevant. But you see their linkages between all these documents and a real policy that's taking place. And therefore, what is the impact? And this is where I think our other interlocutors could tell us on their countries in that sense, Romania, Bulgaria, Moldova. Because as frontline states, with their policy choices over the last 30, 35 years, they have to deal with the consequences of this. And how can they be part of all these developments?
Thank you very much. Dimitrios, I apologize. I forgot to introduce you properly as Professor of International Relations at Panteion University in Athens to begin with. So I'm now kind of introducing you a bit late. I mean, when I read your paper, I was just kind of wondering, when I looked at this kind of EU strategy stuff, I was thinking, like, how much is this is really serious? How much is aspirational, and how much is actually really serious and going to happen? What do you think?
Well, I mean, the concern that it's too aspirational as opposed to really serious, but I think it's also serious. That's my point. Things are moving, and I think the EU is being forced to forge ahead with developing its plan and making it to reality because of developments. I mean, the US is very active in this sense. It's pushing for the vertical corridor. That is a reality. It's already happening in a way. It wants to strengthen the countries involved as part, in that vertical corridor route. The EU has to be involved somehow, which means that the EU, yes, is putting a damper on its, green energy future turning corners around it in order to accommodate the fact that, fossil fuels are still relevant as we try to cope with our energy needs, because we have to decouple very quickly from Russia. It's relevant because we know that there's a competition between, the different connectivity routes that are being developed, whether it's the Middle Corridor, whether it's the EMEC corridor, the Arctic corridor is being developed. There might be room for all of them, but the EU wants to make sure that it has a place and a role in all of them. And it connects the countries that are going to be part of it as well for its own needs, right? So in that sense, I think the sense of urgency might make a lot of these things much more real, because we're going to start now. I mean, later this month, it's 30 years since the Barcelona Declaration, and that's why the new Pact for the Mediterranean was just announced. And there, how do you link that part of the world as well? Because now we know that there's an arc of either connectivity and instability at the same time between the Caspian, the Black Sea, the Aegean, the Eastern Mediterranean, Middle East. I mean, it's there. This is where all the conflict is happening. In a way, a lot of the actors are the same. Russia still has a foothold in the Mediterranean, in Syria, still is a player in the Middle East. The US is there brokering deals. We see this happening even in terms of the US. I just mentioned that the EU just had an EU Central Asia summit earlier this year. The US is about to hold its first US Central Asian summit tomorrow, day after tomorrow, later this week in Washington. Trump has brokered this deal between Azerbaijan and Armenia. I mean, we were hosting only the last week the Armenian ambassador to Greece, who was trying to explain to us what this actually means and the potential for change, which means that all of these things is sort of forcing the EU to ensure that its policy becomes more than just an aspiration. I would like to think that.
Great, thank you very much. And before we move on to Maria, I would just like to say there's aspiration, there's what people would like to do, and there's also an element of things which are being done, which are not being talked about, and I think that's something I would like to mention. What I'm thinking about particularly, since you mentioned at that point skepticism in your paper, you were writing about skepticism about the Trump policy, because at Trump in that week that you were writing it was sort of feeling quite pro-Russian. Now he's feeling kind of anti-Russian again. But in the summer when I was there, when he was still he was in a sort of fairly kind of Russia friendly mode. I visited people building these naval drones. And some of the sort of, the bigger, more deadly and more complex ones, like the bigger, more complex, long range air drones, which are hitting refineries in Russia, these cannot operate without US military satellite intelligence, and that's the same for the air drones and for the sea drones. And I was just, monitoring the news in the last 24 hours in anticipation of this, and I can see that the Ukrainians have hit a refinery at a place called Tuapse on the Black Sea, which is, an important refinery and has been in flames in the last 24 hours. And I wonder whether that's thanks to U.S. military satellite military intelligence that they managed to target that. So it's not only what people say and what people do, there's also things that we can't see, and the things that they're not saying, but they are doing. But that's something we can talk about in the discussion. So now let's move now to Maria Simeonova from Bulgaria. You are the head of the Office of the European Council on Foreign Relations, and your paper really focused on, the effects of the last few years and the war and the conflict on Bulgaria, and especially kind of Russian interference in Bulgaria. What are the most important top lines of your paper?
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Tim, and many thanks for organizing this discussion. It's very important to put the focus on the Black Sea, because I think we have to catch up on putting the focus on the region. I will start in 2007 when Bulgaria joined the EU, and unfortunately, it's important to conclude that in 2007, the Black Sea became an EU sea, but I think the EU did not realize it back then. And the littoral states, Bulgaria and Romania, that joined together, I think did not have the political imagination to develop a regional vision for the Black Sea and for the development of deterrence capabilities. But Bulgaria was expected to play a role in the region by joining the European Union, bringing know-how on post-Soviet space, Black Sea, and the Balkan region in general. And this is, the heritage that we bring from history. Unfortunately, this did not materialize for many reasons. To mention the few crises that followed since our membership into the EU in 2007. But if I can put it briefly, I think our regional involvement was defined by structural dependence and political hesitation. And you already hinted about the Russian influence in Bulgaria. When we talk about Bulgaria's role in the Black Sea, inevitably, the Russian influence conversation has to be put on the table, because this has prevented Bulgaria to develop a regional vision. First, the Russian assets on Bulgarian territory. One of the biggest refineries in the Balkans is Lukoil Neftochim Burgas, which is located on Bulgaria's Black Sea coast. Now things are moving there, but it was a big Russian asset. Also, Bulgaria's nuclear power plants, which was using Russian nuclear fuel, for example. A few people know about the Kamchi resort. This is a resort that was inaugurated back in 2010, so after Bulgaria joined the European Union. And this resort, which hosts a set of sports facilities, even observatories, is owned by the Moscow municipality. So basically there is a piece on the Bulgarian Black Sea coast, on Bulgarian lands, which is owned by Russia, and the Bulgarian state cannot exercise any authority over that piece of land. It's on the Bulgarian northeast coast, so with a very strategic location. And then when I said political...
Just interrupt. Sorry, are you saying this is some sort of extraterritorial thing? Why can it, if they just own it as a piece of property, why can't Bulgaria exercise its authority?
It's a long history that this resort has, but it dates back to the years after the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the collapse of the communist regime in Bulgaria in 1989, when state assets were privatized. So there was a loophole that was used in the Bulgarian legislation that allowed for the Moscow municipality to purchase the land and therefore further developed this land as a resort. It was supposed to host Russian students, and things like that. Since the war in Ukraine in 2022, this has been closed. But there is a speech of Lavrov in the parliament where he mentions that the Kamchi resort is the embodiment of Russia's soft power abroad. And this is well documented. There was a question, just because you asked me to go a bit deeper into this. There was after the war started, there was a question by a Bulgarian member of parliament to the then Bulgarian foreign minister to assess whether this resort represents any threat for Bulgaria's national security. It was confirmed, in a negative way. So there was no threat for the Bulgarian national security. That was in the immediate months after the start of the war in Ukraine. But still, this resort is closed, and it's still owned by Moscow municipality. So this is just to give you, just to draw a picture of how Russian influence looks like and how little is known about the Russian presence in our countries and how big of a price we can all pay by underestimating this. We're talking about hybrid war and hybrid means that are used right now by Russia to disrupt our democracies. So any such assets should be assessed very carefully in the current state of affairs in our region. This is what I wanted to say. Political hesitation, just to go back to the beginning of my talk, political hesitation in Bulgaria, we've always had a portion of political parties that would tend to be pro-Russian, to put it mildly. And those parties share, like the strong pro-Russian parties, their share hasn't moved. If you follow this even from Crimea in 2014, the share doesn't shift that much, no matter the geopolitical circumstances. But they're always the most vocal ones. What does it mean in practice? To Bulgaria's reaction being relatively silent when Russia invaded Georgia in 2008, but also after the illegal annexation of Crimea in 2014. This also resulted partially in the reaction of Bulgaria after the start of the war in 2022, because as we've been discussing before this event, the past 5 years in Bulgaria were defined by political instability. We've had 7 snap elections in only 4 years. And as in everywhere in Europe, this was first experienced in Bulgaria. It's very difficult to govern by majority. Parties enter in very difficult coalition talks. And when the war started, despite having a pro-European reformist political party as the leading one in the coalition, the Bulgarian Socialist Party, which is traditionally leaning towards Russia, opposes any military support for Ukraine, opposes sanctions against Russia, and so on. It was a junior coalition partner, and this prevented Bulgaria from, expressing a bolder support for Ukraine in the immediate months after the war. So now we are moving after 2022 and how the war affected Bulgaria's positioning in the Black Sea. Right now, any vision of Bulgaria for the region can be projected through its membership in the European Union and NATO. And this is what is going on. It's a slow process. Bulgaria is, as in Romania, is in a process of army modernization, which also means modernization of naval capabilities. But until recently, Bulgaria's army was defined, by Soviet standards, weapons, but also ammunitions, which had something positive, that Bulgaria was supplying Ukraine with huge amounts of ammunition, Soviet standard ammunition, something that Ukraine needed a lot after the war started. So right now, for example, Bulgaria purchased in 2019 and 2022 16 F-16s from the US. So it's changing its air defense. The old mix are being changed with F-16s. Bulgaria also participated in the Black Sea mission together with Turkey and Romania, the MCM Black Sea mission, which is anti-mining. Bulgaria is also working to strengthen naval capabilities by purchasing 2 multi-purpose modular patrol vessels that will be operational by the end of 2026, the 2 of them. They're equipped by American communication systems. So these are, some positive steps. But if I have to conclude about the preparedness of Bulgaria to face any attack in the Black Sea region, I would say that it will have to strongly rely on its partners, mostly NATO, of course. So it's Romania, Bulgaria, and Turkey that are the ones that should, be the drivers of what Dimitrios was explaining about the new EU strategy for the Black Sea. It's a great comprehensive document. It touches upon security and defense, connectivity, which is important in order to circumvent all the routes passing through Russia. It also mentions the environmental importance in the Black Sea region. We've been dealing with the negative repercussions of these old ships that Russia was using in order to circumvent the sanctions, the shadow fleet. And we know the effects of spilling oil into the sea. So this dimension in the strategy is very important. What we need is for Romania, Bulgaria, as EU member states to be driving this strategy into full implementation. And here I'm going to conclude, but I'd like to mention a weakness that we have on the eastern flank that Russia very skillfully exploits, and this is the fragility of our public institutions. The Bulgarian Black Sea Fleet is located in the city of Varna. Currently, the mayor of Varna is arrested. He's been under arrest since 8th of July this year with no evidence for his guilt. He was accused of corruption, but we have not seen any proofs for that. And, these attacks on the public institutions or on reformist pro-European political actors that are not part of the status quo, this is something very dangerous because it paves the way for Russia to disrupt our democracies and to disrupt democracies within the European Union, which at some point can result in more hesitant decisions within the EU or prevention of consensus. And I already mentioned how politically hesitant Bulgaria was in 2008 and 2014. We cannot afford now this political hesitancy if we want for any deterrence capabilities in the Black Sea to succeed, and if we want to safeguard our democratic systems from what Russia is doing to them by any types of hybrid means.
So you talked about deterrence and the need for Bulgaria to do various things and the beginnings of a kind of a modernization of Bulgarian Black Sea naval defense. But in all these elections, does anybody campaign on any of these things? Does anyone talk about the fact we need to spend a lot more on navies, we need to modernize our navy, we need to have a different type of navy, we need to have a proper credible defense on the Black Sea? Or is it not really a political issue when it comes to elections and voters?
Indeed, I will answer in two directions. So first, geopolitics is something that Bulgarian politicians are very skeptical about. There is this perception in the EU that on a comparative basis, the Bulgarian society is one of the least supportive of Ukraine and among the most pro-Russian societies in the European Union. There is sociology, there are surveys that show that in the first months after the start of the war, the approval rating, of course, of Putin in Bulgaria decreased sharply, but also the sentiments towards Russia decreased sharply. Unfortunately, this was not used by Bulgarian politicians in order to explain in detail what exactly was going on, who's the aggressor, and why we have to stand by Ukraine. As I already mentioned, because it was a very tough coalition with a pro-Russian party within it and a populist party within it. So because of those perceptions about the sentiments of the Bulgarian society, geopolitics is in the directions that they would not go to, and everything that goes with this, be it strengthening of defense capabilities and so on. But here I'd like to mention a survey that we did at the European Council on Foreign Relations. We did it in a few EU member states, and we asked whether citizens would agree with their state spending more on defense, even if that means spending less on social policies. And on a comparative basis, Bulgaria was in the middle. So I think there is a potential that is not being realized by the Bulgarian politicians. This is what's happening in reality. And the other direction that I wanted to go to by answering this question is because of internal problems and problems with the state of the rule of law in the country that was confirmed by the recent report by the European Commission from July this year. The capacity of the reformist political actors in Bulgaria is directed towards addressing internal issues. And all these internal struggles are taking too much of the energy of the pro-reformist and pro-European parties, and less attention is being put and less capacity is being devoted to the topics we're discussing right now. But if you look at Bulgarian strategic documents, for example, you'll see that the Black Sea is of high importance. But so were the Western Balkans, and we know what is going on right now with Bulgaria's prestige in the countries from the Western Balkans that was severely damaged after the veto over the start of the accession talks with North Macedonia. So there is a difference, at least here, on what is put on the paper and what is actually being done and implemented. But I think the less Russian assets we have on our territory, the more opportunities Bulgaria will have to implement and to put on its territory EU assets and implement the strategy for the Black Sea in a better way.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Now let's turn to Marian Zulean, professor at the University of Bucharest. And your paper is called A Key Player for European Security in the Black Sea Region. It'd be interesting to listen to whether you to what extent your experience is rhymes or is kind of similar with Bulgaria's. But anyway, over to you.
Well, thank you, Tim, and thank you to Südosteuropa-Gesellschaft for inviting us to have this talk. Because you mentioned the title, I should say that it's not a propaganda. The title is Romania as a key player for European security in the Black Sea was taken from the Ursula von der Leyen. Exactly when I wrote the last word, Ursula visited Romania, and she mentioned in her speech that Romania is a key player for European security in the Black Sea. So, and now I'll just say something from my executive summary, like 3 points, and then update the information, and I'll give you the time to get into any direction. So first of all, I start with domestic politics, then secondly about the relation of Romania with Ukraine and impact of the war, third about the Romanian defense policy regarding the Black Sea. Regarding the Romanian domestic politics, I think Romania is somehow obsessed with, after the 1990s, with the political stability and consensus. Since 1995, President Iliescu put all the parties together to sign a consensus of Nagov to ask all the parties to fight for joining NATO and the EU. I think we have somehow too much stability and somehow against the reforms. This idea of quotation of a former Romanian diplomat, Titulescu, who said good domestic policy in order to deliver you a good foreign policy, it's still a sort of logo or motto for the politicians. And speaking about domestic politics, in 2023 was a strange discussion of the running coalition from 3 political parties, Social Democrats and Liberals and Hungarian Party, to organize a sort of gerrymandering, what they call innovative politics. They did a sort of gerrymandering the elections. They move all the elections in order to win for the next 4 years. But the surprise was next year in 2024 when they lost. I mean, the presidential election was what I call the black swan surprise. Călin Georgescu, guy not known 2 weeks before the elections, with 2% in polls, he succeeded to be the first in the elections. And due to some, probably many people know, and due to some intelligence reports, the Romanian elections were annulled by the Constitutional Court. This guy was forbidden to candidate, and this is a big trouble that lasts until today. He is under investigation for being a sort of pro-Russia, anti-EU, and also the general prosecutor come up with 2 files to claiming that he even tried to have a coup d'etat. Some people from mercenaries, like sort of Wagner type mercenaries, were involved in this. But I would say that this is not the final word, it's just an accusation. We have to go into court. However, the elections were rerun, and a new president from civil society, Nicu Popescu, won the election, and now he is going to have the national security strategy that will define more clear what Romania wants for the next 4 years. On the other hand, the new government is what is called pro-European government, faces some interesting constraints, like trying to repair the public finances, to rebuild the trust in political institutions, because the trust is very low, it's like 10% for a parliament, and maybe trust in European institution is higher, it's 30%, and also would like to stimulate the economy threatened by national populist opposition. There is a fight, including in the running coalition, every day. It's a very strange situation that a party that produced much of the economic distrust is now fighting with the other members of the political coalition. So this is an internal situation of Romania, but still we have a pro-European and stable government. On the relation with Ukraine, the second point, Romania has a sort of ups and downs after the 1990s due to some historical problems. There are problems regarding the territorial delimitation, the Snake Island, the Romanian minority in Ukraine, all sorts of the problems. They are somehow partially solved in 1997 when we signed the Treaty of Neighborly Relations between Romania and Ukraine. However, the opposition somehow use all this problem to somehow to get political votes and gains. So if I jump to your team's article about the impact of the war on Romania, I would say that first of all, there is a political impact. Somehow this war did clarify more the relations of Romania with Ukraine. At the beginning of the war, the foreign minister, I mentioned in my paper, Bogdan Aurescu, when he was asked by the BBC at Hard Talk, did you help Ukraine? Did you send military aid? And this, his answer was also obsession, like no comment, no comment. My government decided not to comment. That was a sort of fear that he will, by saying the truth or how Romania helped Ukraine in the war, will somehow trigger many problems from the opposition side. So, and also in some general public. So, but now politically, the impact made clear relations between Romania and Ukraine. On the military side, I would say that this war in Ukraine somehow, first of all, did a sort of NATO enhancement by bringing Sweden, Finland, and make a better NATO and larger NATO. And also, as I mentioned in one of my previous papers, the Eastern Europe was not fully integrated into NATO, was more politically integrated until the war in Ukraine. So this war in Ukraine helped, that was happened because of the opposition of Russia under NATO Russia Council, but now it's free, we are free to rebuild roads, defense infrastructure. So this was another impact. As far as the armament, first of all, in Romania, we have a very good program of rearmament earlier than the war in Ukraine. But Navy was the least developed program of rearming Romanian Navy due to some political issues, also some financial issues, didn't invest a lot in the Navy. So we have a lot of talk about how to buy 4 corvettes, from which country, from France, from Damen, from all other countries. So finally, we choose to buy only one from Turkey, from Hisar corvette. The problem, or maybe the solution of the war is now the military, the general staff had the lessons learned, and as you mentioned, now they think more than instead of buying corvettes or submarines, better buy these surface vehicles like drones. And this is a good side also, the good impact of the war, because Romanian military learn the lessons and they are preparing to change the program. Last point, it's about EU strategy. So in the Black Sea. So Romania, I won't go too much in history, but one of the historians, Gheorghe Brătianu, wrote one of the famous book on the Black Sea in 1940, and he is many times quoted. And Romania after joining NATO, as Bulgaria also joined NATO and EU, thinks to have the responsibility on the regional security, mainly on Moldova and the Black Sea. Of course, Romanian troops contributed to peacekeeping in the Balkans, in Afghanistan, everywhere the NATO asked, but Black Sea was also sort of ranging high in the agenda since 2007. I mentioned in my paper the National Security Strategy 2007 mentioned the Black Sea as a strategic interest for Romania. There are many institutions residing in Romania, including Black Sea Trust for the Black Sea, the Black Sea Forum, Black Sea University Networks used to be last year in Bucharest, and contributed in the designing two strategies. First of all, Romania had a big lobby in the United States for the Black Sea Security Act in 2023, and also on the European strategy, the recent strategy. Moreover, Romania said that we are going to go from strategy to implementation, and there is a process of in the think tanks and the NGOs now. I have to mention to help the government, how to help the government to move from the strategy, which is more visionary than a clear strategy, to implement the provisions of this new EU strategy. And I have to mention that President Nicu claimed to have a leadership and assumed that Romania would like to host the EU Maritime Security Hub in Constanța. They are now preparing papers or position papers and what Romania brings and what can do, of course, with Bulgaria and with the other littoral countries like Turkey as an important actor, and of course the others like Georgia and Ukraine. The last point now, to update the information, I just got back from United States, and I was very much interested to see what happened with the United States strategy on the Black Sea. They have 1 month ago parliamentary congressional hearing on this. There are nice words. However, the impact is still not very clear if the Trump administration will allow some funding for that. But on the other hand, we have a surprise also, like a couple of days ago. The global positioning, global posture of United States 2025 decided to withdraw some troops, actually a brigade from all Eastern Europe, starting with Romania, but also from Slovakia, Hungary, and Bulgaria, which trigger a sort of maybe it's too much to call the hysteria in Romanian media. It's a sort of hysteria why the United States decided to withdraw the troops. This is our strategic partnership is called the Trinity of strategic partnership in Romania, is to have a strategic partnership with the United States, member of NATO, and the EU membership. So yeah, this is a discussion underway, and maybe as a result, in a couple of days, Secretary General of NATO Rutte is going to come to Bucharest, maybe to discuss to to calm down the public feeling and to discuss what NATO can do to replace the rotational force that has been withdrawn from the United States. And of course, there is also idea to ask France to assume more leadership, because France is a framework nation for Romania under NATO. And more or less, Romania is going to collaborate more on this Black Sea security. But it's a hard way to go from vision and from a nice vision to implementing the Black Sea strategy. And that's it.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I mean, personally, how worried are you about this American move to reduce the numbers of troops? Briefly.
Personally, I'm not very much worried about that. I had also a life as a policy advisor for presidency like 20 years ago and contributed to integration of Romania into NATO. So it would be a disappointment now to see more withdrawal of the troop. But personally, I consider that we can, first of all, these troops didn't have a totally function as a mean of deterrence. Basically, even if you have only one American soldier, it would be okay, because even 100, 1,000 or 2,000 is not enough to deter Russia. So basically, we have to reorganize the defense. I think I believe the Pentagon, or the how it's called now, the War Department, they need to redeploy forces, but I don't think it will be destructive. I mean, it's not fully disengagement from Romania. And as I mentioned, Rute is coming here. On the other hand, in my discussion, some think tank in Washington, they assured me that including the Congress, they are going to oppose to the withdrawal of the troops in such a way, like immediately.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not worried. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Let's now go to Chisinau, to Karolina Bogatiuc, and you are the Executive Director of the NGO Citizens for Europe. When you wrote your paper, the future of Maia Sandu and the PAS government, pro-European, pro-Western government, looked quite insecure, and the election of the 28th of September proved was a big boost and for their re-election. So I think actually the first and most important thing for you to do is to update us and tell us, what's happening and which direction Moldova is now heading in, and how secure you think its pro-European future is with this new government.
First of all, thank you very much, Tim. Thank you for introducing me. If you allow me, I just want to focus on my paper in three ways. First of all, how the war of Ukraine affected Moldova. Secondly, how EU stepped up in Moldova and how helped for Moldova to avoid some crisis. And the last one, the elections that we already had, and how our people secured the European path of our country. So first of all, the year 2022 was a turning point for Moldova. We are like a country next to the conflict. We were so vulnerable to Russian gas. I say vulnerable. We were, because now we secured and we have many sources for energy and gas. I mean, our government managed to do it. No one knew what could happen with Moldova at that time. We didn't have one protocol to say how we can avoid any situation. It was like a critical period for Moldova. Immediately after the war in Ukraine started, Moldova started to deal with many crises, economic crisis, energy crisis, refugees crisis that affected so much our country. The prices went up, the inflation soared, like the investors started to be scared if they have reasons to invest in our country. Some of them, they left our market. Of course, like this is why our economy has a low growth. It's just 0.1%. Immediately after this, we were lucky at that time that when the war started in Ukraine, we had a pro-EU government that managed this crisis. They maintain calm and peace in our country. But the people, of course, they started to be disappointed in the actual ruling party. Why? Because they promised many things to do, but at the meantime, due to this crisis that started in our country, they weren't able to do everything that they promised to the people. This is in terms of defense, of course, the war in Ukraine and security, the war in Ukraine reshaped like totally what the security means and what it demands in our country. So we have a small army, around like 6,000 people, with all like infrastructure. Of course, our government, they voted the new strategy in terms of defense for until 2030. But and their like aim is to increase the defense spending to 1% of GDP by 2030. So it's an ambitious target for our country because we are not NATO member. I mean, our intention is just to join the EU. So we are in this process now, doing the necessary reforms. Coming in terms of like security, also we have Transnistria, for people who doesn't know, like a separatist region where we have Russian troops on our territory. It's a frozen conflict, and now in terms of like as a leverage or a tool that Russia tried to influence our situation in our country, is less as a battlefield, but more as a tool to destabilize, to promote different anti-EU messages from Transnistria to our people, to spread like fear for people. For example, if Moldova, they promoted different messages. One of it is if Moldova will join the EU, so our country will become the second Ukraine. And this message was promoted as well by the spokesperson of Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Of course, Russia, before the free elections that we had, I say free elections because we had EU referendum, constitutional referendum in October 2024, in the same day as the presidential elections, and in 2025, in September 28, we had the parliamentary elections, the most important elections that we had since our independence. So. Before these elections, of course, Russia used the whole arsenal that they had. First of all, the disinformation. They used like network of influencers. They work closely with religious leaders. In 2024, we had the situation then around 40 religious leaders, they went in Moscow and they came with different messages that what they promoted in their communities. They also used cryptocurrencies like to pay people. They used as well like churches. They used vote buying scam. More recently, they used as well like Telegram as a channel where they promoted different messages and some indications for people how to organize and to block. To block the ideas of European integration and to block governance reforms. What is the good part after this is how the EU stepped up in our country. Of course, the EU started to be more visible. They helped our country through different programs. They announced this growth plan of 1.9 billion euro. That means that our government has as aim to increase the economy with 8% per year. This is like a bold target. Also, like the EU, in May 2024, Moldova became the first non-EU country who signed a defense defense partnership agreement with the EU. We set out cooperation in terms of like defense, resilience, and hybrid threats. Also, like in 2024, the EU launched a EU partnership mission in Moldova that also helped to secure our resilience and our quick response to different crises. The EU, of course, Moldova, despite these challenges that we faced, Moldova submitted the request to the EU to obtain this, to join the EU. Over like 3 months, I mean, we submitted on the 3rd of March in 2022, 1 month immediately after the war started, and we obtained the candidate status in July 2022, so immediately. Of course, Moldova now managed as well to officially open negotiations with the EU, and the government it's continued to doing the necessary reforms to open the first cluster on fundamentals with the EU, but at the moment this process is blocked by Hungary. It's not because of Moldova, but because it doesn't support Ukraine. And this raised the question about decoupling Moldova and Ukraine, to be together or to go separately. Of course, we don't, now it's like a political cost. We cannot assume to go separately with Ukraine, because we are safe today because Ukraine is resisting. In terms as well, about these elections, after the elections on 28th of September, like our people definitely choose the European path and European direction. So the ruling party that was before this Action and Solidarity Party secured the new mandate with 55 mandates in the parliament. We already have set the government, Munteanu's government, with the entire cabinet. It happened this Sunday. Of course, now they have, they call them like the government of the European integration process, because they set it also like an ambitious target, Moldova to be ready to join the EU by 2028, and also to sign the EU treaty. Of course, people now are pushing them to do the necessary reforms. They are monitoring what the government is doing. Otherwise, if the actual government will not manage to do this, of course, it will be very difficult, and many experts say that they will probably not secure another mandate or will not be for the next elections. About Russia, now what it began to be like a fragile country such as Moldova now became like a story of resilience, and a good example for other countries how we combat Russian interference in our country through different like instruments, through like civil society, media, influencers, that they mobilized and started to do different awareness campaigns in our country. Plus the government, of course, was more ready, as was for the EU referendum. Then more than 130,000 votes voted by Russia. Propaganda through their like proxy organizations, through political parties that they have and maintain in our country. We cannot say now that Russia will renounce to its ambitions in our country. Of course, we have to work, because in 2027 we'll have local elections, and we have in 2028 the presidential elections again. And Russia is continuing to recruit and also like to have their people in our country who continues to present the European Union as a threat. And they tend to promote messages such that Moldova has to maintain its neutrality, and also their traditional culture and like our own religion, because they present if Moldova will join the EU, so Moldova will lose this stuff.
Okay, thank you very much. One quick question: the issue of neutrality, you're constitutionally bound to neutrality. Is there any debate about changing that, or There's no debate about that.
No, because I forgot to mention about this. Because if people are scared about this, when we discuss about NATO, defense, like increase the capabilities, neutrality, the people are scared, and like around 60% of population are against this topic. So somehow we treat this as a sensible topic at this moment. I don't know if the government will put again focus this topic after that they won the elections, but at this moment there are not any debates about this.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, we will come back to you. Now, I would encourage everybody to ask questions. Either you can ask them in the chat or we can try and do it directly if you want, but I'm going to start off with two that we've already got. Dimitrios, the first question is from you, from Johanna Daimel. She says, one regional player, Turkey, a NATO member, plays an important role, sometimes constructively, as in the case of the grain agreement, but also as a potential spoiler. How would you assess Turkey and its potential role for security in the Black Sea, but also beyond? And I would just like to remind our listeners and people who are watching that for many years that you were a professor in Istanbul, so you know Turkey as well as any, probably better than any other Greek academic. So what do you think about the role of Turkey in the future?
Yeah, no, this is a very interesting question from Johanna. We shall see. We shall see. You know, since the end of the Cold War, what Turkish policy has been to be a balancing one with Russia, and that means that it wanted to have a droit de regard together with Moscow, Ankara and Moscow, in a way deciding together the fate of the Black Sea region. So to counterbalance Russia, and also because of its size, because of its geography, and so on. And this is a policy it has built its whole strategy on in the region. But over time, it has evolved. It has evolved towards its own vision of strategic autonomy. It has stressed, for example, and it's very interesting with all the developments right now in the energy field, that for decades that it's an energy hub in the region. But now it's in competition with other countries. Romania also says it's an energy hub. Developments have changed. So, or Greece also suggests an energy hub, even though, as I said, regions are sort of linked. And so I think for Turkey, it has to adapt its policy because, the dynamics of the EU strategy, which is connectivity between regions in particular on a variety of issues which are just as relevant to Turkey as they are to the other non-literal states, to the other literal states and non-literal states, means that Turkey has to play ball in these arrangements. And Turkey is singled out at times that, you know, it's relevant, especially in the EU's cross-regional strategy, that it's a relevant actor linking the South Caucasus, the Black Sea, and Central Asia together. On the other hand, it's under pressure as well, in particular in terms of its energy policy. You know, what was it, not too long ago, there was a Erdogan-Trump meeting in the White House, and for a long time, the differences have been, Turkey's attempts to obtain the F-35 warplanes have not been successful because it has acquired the S-400 missile defense system from Russia and has been told that you cannot be, as a NATO member state, have both. This was put on the table by the American president, but also the new issue that was on the table was divest from buying fossil fuels from Russia, which is something that the EU has decided to do. And Turkey has said, well, it's not that easy to do right now because it's an energy-dependent country. And even though there have been moves, and I was just reading, there was an article by Reuters that very recently it's starting, just like the Indians and others that depend on Russian fossil fuels, have been trying to divest, but you cannot do it overnight. Turkey, we shall see where it stands. I mean, it's a key actor. It stresses the fact that it has the second largest army, military force, in terms of manpower, at least, after the US and NATO. It's willing to, and it has shown this in other parts of the world, to put boots on the ground if need be, especially in a post-settlement period in Ukraine, willing to contribute to European defense. But on the other hand, it has to sort of adapt and do this because right now I think the powers leading the process, the stakeholders leading the process are the Americans, and in their way, the Europeans with their connectivity agendas, and somehow it has to find a way to fit in there. So I understand its relevance. I mean, Maria said, the three little states that need to work together are Bulgaria, Romania, and Turkey. Absolutely, and you have the example of the mines clearance initiative. But I have a feeling Ankara has to slightly change its position, otherwise it's going to be left out, because it's balancing between belonging to the West and somewhere belonging to itself somewhere else, lives it in a bind, even though I think it's also realizing the limits of belonging on its own somewhere else, because then you have to face powers such as Russia and China and others on your own. There is also, a lot to do with your security that you belong to the Western Alliance. So it's not just relevant for small countries, it's relevant for big countries as much. So we shall see where it goes. But right now, it does not seem to have the initiative on many of these issues that are happening. And I think this is where Turkish foreign policy makers have to sort of rethink a little bit what they want to do and how they will fit into all these developments.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And Ioana has another question. She says, if Trump and Putin meet in Budapest, well, that would have to be sort of like a reappointment in Budapest, since that was already cancelled. But that was last week, so next week it could be on again. She says, and just let us. I'm going to paraphrase now. Let us imagine that there was some sort of ceasefire, there was some sort of end of the war, which is, of course, very hard to imagine at the moment, but imagine that there was. Here's a question for you, Marian and Maria especially. Would Bulgaria and Romania be prepared to participate in peacekeeping forces if necessary? Maria, what do you think? Would Bulgaria be prepared to send some troops?
I wanted to go first, and I'll be brief because that's an easy one. The Bulgarian parliament already gave its opinion. This is a very controversial topic. And as I said, the parliament already voted a declaration saying that Bulgaria will not participate in any type of ceasefire which involves sending troops, Bulgarian troops on the ground. So now this was already very well articulated, but I take the opportunity to mention that, safeguarding any type of peace, a ceasefire, can have other dimensions, and the Black Sea region is very important in this respect. Do you remember President Zelensky's peace formula? Because in I think point 8 there was the assessment of ecological damage, Ukraine's recovery and reconstruction. Back then, a Bulgarian delegation visited Kiev and expressed its will to be the leading nation, the leading state behind the ecological reconstruction of Ukraine. The Black Sea is also important, and Marian mentioned the maritime security hub, which can also have some functions to coordinate, the reconstruction of Ukraine. It will be based on the Black Sea coast, most certainly in an EU member state. So participating in any safeguarding of ceasefire can have different dimensions, different than sending troops on the ground, and the Black Sea EU littoral states can play a big role. Another important topic in this direction are the military corridors, and this is something we have in the EU Black Sea strategy. The North-South connections are very important in this respect. This is something that we are lacking in the region. Romania, Bulgaria, Greece have signed memorandums in developing this North-South-South-North connectivity. We're talking about dual-use corridors, which will be very needed if we're talking of any type of peace in Ukraine. So this is something very important to be looking at.
Okay, Marian?
Yeah. Romania is more or less similar with Bulgaria. We don't have a binding decision, but there are statements from the president, prime minister, and the government, foreign ministry that Romania is not going to send troops. He's going to cooperate and is going to find another way to be involved. We don't have a clear theory of victory, and this is because I think it's an issue of hybrid war, internal hybrid war. The opposition, which is more pro-Russia, would like to see Ukraine defeated, and they are 35% in the polls. And the governing coalition is pro-Ukraine, but there is no clear theory of victory what we follow. But this issue can be a trigger, sort of not only electoral but a hybrid war in domestic politics. My view here, it's like to the people in opposition, it's like to look at Zbigniew Brzezinski saying that Russia with Ukraine, it's a big empire. Without Ukraine, will be manageable. Or I don't know, somebody said that it is just a gas station with guns. So if people would follow, to help or expect Russia to win, what happened if this Ukraine and Russia now, with all skills and armament, will come together, would be a bigger threat for NATO in the EU, I think so. So my expectation is to be on the side of Ukraine, but otherwise it's a counterfactual, since the Budapest meeting was cancelled, and moreover Trump announced yesterday that even Viktor Orban is somehow punished, should cut the oil from Russia. And but I'd like to add also on the previous question you asked me about the fear about the American withdrawal, and this is just the news today. The German CEO from Rheinmetall signed the contract with the Romanian government, with even Prime Minister, on building the powder and announced some big investment from the German side. I mentioned, but the fact that we are doing a conference with the German Südosteuropa is a sign of, and there are some expectations also from Romania that if United States will do some, not only France, but Germany is also responsible for the watching Black Sea and the South. I'm not sure if I was clear on that, but it's just an expectation that Germany will be more involved. And on SAFE program, it's already looking for contracts in Romania. Thank you.
Great. I mean, thank you very much. I don't see any other questions for the moment, but if anybody would like to ask some questions, we still have a little bit of time. But in the meantime, since we haven't got one for the moment, I'm going to ask Carolina one, which kind of a little bit follows on from this. I'm not going to ask you, Carolina, if you think Moldovan troops would ever go to Ukraine, because that's not so relevant. But I wonder whether to what extent there's a feeling that, or could you tell us that, let's just imagine that things go really badly in Ukraine and the Russians somehow do end up in Odessa, which is what they would like to do, and they've said that very, very clearly. Do you ever feel that that you could rely on Romania to help protect you if Russian troops were suddenly on your borders?
Of course, I don't want to imagine this situation, and I hope that Ukraine will resist. But in this bad scenario, of course, Moldova will rely definitely on Romania. And as far as I know, Romania government already started to introduce in their defense strategy a point how to deploy some troops in Moldova without being considered that is NATO. I mean, it's not from NATO, but it's just from Romania not being part of NATO. I don't know how they will formulate this in their defense strategy, but they started to work and to analyze this scenario, what would happen.
Marian, is that something that people have talked about in Romania, that Romania could help defend Moldova if necessary?
Well, I think it's not so clear as Carolina say. The chief Chief of General Staff mentioned that he's going to have some help. I didn't say exactly that we are going to put in the strategy sending troops without a NATO consent. I don't think it's the correct interpretation. It says it's going to help Moldova, and I think it's doing help training troops, sending maybe military armament, but I don't think we'll send without the consent of NATO. So we should think in a more institutional way rather than have like feeding some expectations that are not ready to be fulfilled.
Well, okay, I'm sorry. We've been talking a little bit about kind of energy, and there's something I wanted to ask you about, Karina, picking up on your paper. You talked about about Moldova still relying on electricity from the electricity plant, the electricity power station in Transnistria. But I thought that was all over years ago. I thought that you didn't buy electricity anymore, precisely because you can get it from Romania and from elsewhere nowadays, and therefore you're much less reliant on, or you're not actually reliant on. You're certainly not reliant on Russia for gas anymore. And I think you're not reliant on it for electricity, but I wanted to check with you because that's
now, of course, we collaborate very closely with Romania and we buy electricity for them. And by the end of 2025, we will probably have ready the new power plant Vulcanești Chișinău that will help to interconnect with Romania as well and to be more safe and to take more electricity for them. We diversified our sources, but of course, because we have Cuciugan power plant, it's located in Transnistria that produced much Moldova's energy. This is why, because the power plant is situated there. This is the problem. We cannot.
But I thought you were not buying from there anymore. You're saying that
we stopped, but like now we buy for the left side of the country. They produce but like the left Transnistria region is like part of our country, and we consider that they produce for like Transnistria region, and we bought like for sure. I mean, I have to check, but we bought like electricity since 2024. Okay. It was communicated that we didn't buy anymore, but at least when we had this crisis in December 2024, we started to buy again from them because it's cheaper and it was safer at one moment.
Okay, great. Okay, well look.
But in terms, just I want to come back to the previous question about like military troops. If Romania is willing to help us. I'm trying to find that article that I wrote about this, and it was like an official statement saying that they, of course, will help Moldova, and they are introducing something new in their strategy. So if I will find by the end of this discussion, I will send here.
We've only got a couple of minutes, but Maria, you wanted to say something. You've got your hand up there.
Yes, I just wanted to chip in because we started talking about energy, and I'd like to make a point. You realize that when we talk about Black Sea security, we tend to focus on our individual countries. And I think energy is something that we can focus if we want to talk about the region as a whole and develop some regional initiatives and institutionalize the Black Sea. The Black Sea is a new external border, and it's the least institutionalized one. We need to perceive the Black Sea as an entry point to the European Union. And energy, I'm talking about it because, Romania is drilling, Turkey is drilling for natural gas, which will contribute to the overall European energy security. But we also need to think in terms of renewables potential of the Black Sea area as a whole, and connecting the littoral states, their energy markets, which will make, the region stronger and will also contribute to the energy security. There's big potential. Onshore wind, for example, it's something that some attention should be put on. But I'm just mentioning this as an idea how to perceive the region as a region and not as composed of individual countries whose problems differ a lot, but try to, find the common denominator and develop a more regional identity and mentality. It will be hard, but it's not
Yes.
impossible.
But this idea of the Black Sea region is something that we've been talking about for generations, and is what that I mentioned that paper that I did with Dimitrios in 2010. We were talking about that. So I think that's sort of an aspiration, and now in the middle of a war, it's kind of even less likely. But anyway, point taken, Dimitrios, and then we're going to wind up.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to raise a couple of other things that were said, and I think they're very relevant. I mean, Maria talked about, and it was interesting, the structural dependence on Russia. And that's something to consider. And if you link this to the answer to your question, which was about, involvement, or Johanna's question about involvement of sending troops to Ukraine, or sending troops from either Romania or Bulgaria, or even my country has said, no, they're not going to do it. It's interesting because it's linked to the legacy. As flank states, smaller countries, our histories tell us we cannot trust. I mean, and this is impacting on, we cannot trust the bigger powers or the alliances we belong to. If you talk to the Hungarians about why they act that way, it's not a question of Orban. It's the legacy of 1956, which impacted the the Budapest uprising, Spring uprising. They were not helped, and they were left on their own. And I think this has happened. This has impacted countries in a way also. And so this disconnect that exists between, say, strategies, national strategies, which, say, yes, we belong and this, and we should, be united. And then the political debate, which is a real debate, and, where, politicians get elected and we as voters act at our is something to consider, and which makes very difficult for literal states to act on their own, but it also explains the reticence on a number of issues, even though they understand they've become even more relevant flank states now in this divide between the West regarding Ukraine and Russia. And it's just a point that I think, this discussion clarified this for me at least.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, we've kind of run out of time, so I'm going to pass the microphone back to Christian, who I think should wind this up for us. Thank you. And thanks very much for all our participants. That was really, really great. I've really kind of learned a lot.
Thank you very much, Tim. And I won't go into the direction of wrapping everything up we've just discussed, because I think that would just surpass our time limit very much. I would very much recommend to everybody who's interested in the topic and who hasn't done so yet to download our publication. It's available freely on our website in the Southeast European Focus series. And I think we've learned that the topic is important, and it's growing when it comes to attention and not decreasing. So I think we will definitely stay on the issue. And for now, I would like to thank everybody very much for this very interesting discussion, and look forward to continue working on this issue, and wish you all a nice evening. Thank you very much.
Everyone, thank you all very much. And yes, as I say, this is going to run and run.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.